morning's scripture reading will be Luke 14, 34, and 35. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is neither fit for the land, nor for the dunghill, but men throw it out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear.
Nope, I didn't hear it quite. There we go. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Good to see everyone this morning, and glad that we're all able to be here together. If you're visiting with us, we want you to know you are our honored guest, and we're excited that you're with us. We would love for you to stick around a while after services so we can get to better know you. A couple things I want to mention before I get into my lesson. First of all, tonight we're going to be looking at the minor prophet Habakkuk. As you know, we've been looking through Wednesday nights at the minor prophets, and we've been going through them, and I mentioned to you when we started our new study that we would be doing what we were doing Wednesday night on Sunday night. So tonight is Habakkuk. There'll be an outline to add to your collection if you keep those that we've gone through, and we'll be able to do that. Also, that brings up what we're doing on Wednesday nights. This last Wednesday night, we started a study called The Big Picture. It is based off of a book with that title. And it is a very good study. It was a very good class Wednesday night. It was very encouraging to me to, when we went through the questions in the first chapter, to have a couple dozen people shouting out the answers. There's nothing that inspires and encourages a teacher more than that. And I want to say that the way the class went very much uplifted me and encouraged me. It is not too late to get in on that and be a part of that. If you did not get one of the books and your family and want to participate in that, please see me. And we've got some of the books. I've got them in my office. I can give you one, and you can do that. We're going to be doing Lesson 2, which covers the first 11 chapters of Genesis. If you want to read that, that'd be great. In addition to reading the chapter, the first 11 chapters of Genesis is where our focus will be this coming Wednesday evening. So please come be a part of that, and as a family, hopefully you can get your studies together and be ready for that study. This morning I want us to think about this idea that we are the salt of the earth. Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet." Mark 9:50 says, "Salt is good, but if salt has lost its saltiness, how again will it be made salty again? Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another." Luke 14:34 and 35, the passage that Nathan just read to us, says, "Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is of no use either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown away. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Also in Colossians 4, verse 6, it says, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." And then also in James chapter 3, verses 11 and 12, it says, "Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water." These passages are all the passages in the New Testament that use the word salt, or the idea of salt. There's several in the Old Testament, but these are the New Testament passages that deal with this subject. And so I want us to take a few minutes and consider the things that we learn out of those texts involving salt. And the first one of those is this. We are the salt of the earth, and we're to have salt within ourselves. The text in Matthew 5:13 says, you are the salt of the world, the salt of the earth. And then in Mark 9:50 makes almost the same statement, but then he says you are to have salt and peace within yourselves. And so I want us to draw some things out of that. What does it mean to be the salt of the earth? What does it mean to have salt within yourselves? And so I guess it takes defining what salt is for and what it's all about. Salt is one of the most important minerals on the face of our planet. Our bodies require salt. Now, unfortunately, the American diet usually gives us too much salt. And you may well have a doctor that gets on you about how much salt you're intaking. And that's true. But we do have to have some salt. It is required for our bodies to work properly, for the correct balance of moisture and other things within our body. Salt is an important mineral for us to have. Salt just simply makes food taste better. It preserves things. It helps them be more palatable. It helps us with the things that we experience. You know, Jesus says that if salt has lost its flavor, then it's good to be, for nothing else, to be thrown out and trampled on. Now, we recognize in West Virginia that when you get a couple inches of snow on the roads, salt is okay to be put out and be trampled on, isn't it? That salt actually still has properties that cause ice and snow to melt. And so we might even put it out on the roads to benefit us. In their day and time, in their context, it wasn't really necessary for melting ice, but it is even good for us in that. But we are to have that salt within ourselves and to have that influence upon others. It is important for us to do that. You know, you think about this world and you think about the things within this world, and I want to tell you, this world's a lot better place because Christians are a part of it. Because God has put it within His people to be the salt of the earth. It's very scary to me to think about where our world is headed to begin with. But if you were to remove all of the Christians out of the world and to think about the influence of positive that they have of being the salt of the earth, it would get vastly scarier. Now, I will admit, there are several Christians, and even us on some days, that don't act the way we should. And some days we struggle to be the salt of the earth. Some days we struggle to do what we're supposed to. But we should always be trying our best to be that salt, to be that preserving factor, to be that help upon the earth. And it's certainly important that we do that. You know, the thing about salt is it is going to have an effect. When you look at the text, and you look at the one in James, where he says you can't get salt water and fresh water out of the same fountain, out of the same pool. And that's very true. Because once salt is entered in, it's there. You can't shut off the valve. It's there, and it's present. In the same way with our influence, it's there, and it cannot be removed. The influence can be good. The influence can be bad. Sometimes you want salt in the water. Sometimes you don't. But you can't really do much about it after it's happened. Second of all, we must season our speech with salt. In the text in Colossians that the Apostle Paul stated that we are to season our words with salt. Now, that doesn't mean literally pour salt on our tongues before we get ready to speak. We know that that means that we are to be careful about what we say, to be kind about what we say. Now, that doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that we simply sugarcoat things. Because I can guarantee you, if you've ever read anything that the Apostle Paul has written in the Bible, you cannot accuse Paul of sugarcoating stuff. He's the last person, probably in all of human history, that could be accused of sugarcoating the truth. That's not what Paul's suggesting in any way, shape, or form. But there's a way to say things in which people can understand them, a way in which that they can tolerate them. The way that we say things, when we tell people they're lost, we should do it with pain in our hearts, maybe with a tear in our eye, seasoned with salt. We shouldn't want to sound happy that people are lost. We shouldn't want to be judgmental or accusatory toward those that are lost. Instead, say the things with an appeal, with a love, with a compassion that can be described as seasoned with salt. And lastly, I want us to notice that salt is useful only when it gets out of the shaker. Salt, it's important to put it in the shaker. Yes, it's important to hold on to it for when you need it. But it doesn't influence anything in any way sitting in the shaker. If you don't sprinkle it on the food, if you don't put it on the roads, it doesn't matter how high the pile at the DOT is. If they don't put it on the roads, it doesn't help. It doesn't matter how much salt, how much seasoning you have if you refrain from saying those things. You know, we talk about using our speech seasoned with salt, but I can tell you that saying nothing is almost always the worst thing. Because people believe you don't care if you don't say anything. A lot of times even saying maybe something wrong or that came out not exactly the way you wanted to say it is actually more palatable than saying nothing at all. But when we have the opportunity, and as much as lies within us, say what we say, season with salt. We being the salt cannot use that if it just stays within us. We talked this morning in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 about the treasure that's within earthen vessels, that we have the light and the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We have the message and truth that is the most wonderful message in all of human history. We have the power of God for the salvation of everyone within us. But what if we fail to share that? If we keep that treasure locked up within us. It's very much that way. If we're the salt of the earth and all we ever do is sit in the salt shaker, what good does it do? Got something to read to you. A man fell in a pit one day and couldn't get out. A subjective person came along and said, "I feel for you down there." An objective person walked by and said, "It's logical that someone would fall down there." A Pharisee came by and said, "Only bad people fall into pits." A mathematician came by and calculated how deep the pit was. A news reporter wanted the exclusive story on the pit. An IRS agent came by and wanted to know if he was paying taxes on the pit. A self-pitying person came by and said, "You haven't seen anything till you've seen my pit." A fire and brimstone preacher said, "You deserve your pit." A Christian scientist observed, "The pit is just within your mind." A psychologist came by and said, "Your mother and father are to blame for you being in a pit." A self-esteem therapist came by and said, "Believe in yourself and you too can get out of your pit." An optimist came by and said, "Things could be worse." A pessimist came by and said, "Things will get worse." Jesus came by and saw the man, took him by the hand and lifted him out of the pit. All of those observations are exactly how we are if we stay in the salt shaker. But it's only when we step out, we use the influence within us, the opportunity to help, to teach, to encourage others. It doesn't matter what you say to them. You know what they need more than anything else? Help out of the pit. There are people in the middle of deep pits all around us. And what they need is help. And as long as we would be in the salt shaker, we're not providing the help that they need. Salt is powerful. It influences everything you put it in. It influences the food you put it in. It influences the water that it's in. It influences the